Hey, everybody. Welcome to Encounter Grace. We're so glad you're with us. I'm here with Ben Hendricks. And Ben, we both are wearing this beautiful dark blue from Duke University.
Uh-huh. That's what it is.
Oh, we just lost 3/4 of the audience. I shouldn't say that word.
We're down to 9. Just kidding.
Well, we're glad everyone's joining us. And Ben, I'm so glad you're here today. Let me ask you this question. What do a courtroom, marriage vows, and a golf game have in common?
Places we sin.
This is the start of my
okay.
second favorite joke, actually. Do you know what my favorite joke is? It starts this way. 3 youth pastors walked into a bar. And then you don't hear the rest because they all get fired. No, I'm kidding. No. Golf game, marriage vows, courtroom, they all have to do with honor. You got your honor in the courtroom. We love, honor, and cherish our wives or our husbands. And when you win the hole before you tee off first on the next hole, you have the honors. We're going to talk about honor today. What is honor? From the 10 Commandments to the throne room worship at the end of the Bible in Revelation 4 and 5. Honor is a big deal in Scripture. And Ben, I don't know the first thing about it, so that's why we hired you.
Oh, yeah. Well, everything today is going to be stuff that I've learned from other honorable people. I mean, I didn't even know that about golf. I've never gotten to hit first. So that's new for me. But yeah, we live in a fairly, and this might be broad brushstrokes here, but I think we'll all agree, we live in a fairly divided world where, especially in the kind of throes of a political season where honor seems to be left far, far, far away.
Gulp.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's true.
I'd love to have a conversation about what does the Bible say about honor? And then what are some ways that we can help establish honor in our life? Almost operationalize it in a way.
That's a great word.
To help make it practical. And so we're going to talk pretty quickly about kind of what honor is. I'll give a pretty brief working definition of it, and then give you a quick acronym that helps me remember these things, to kind of give us the whole picture of it, I think. And then kind of look at a couple places that we need to make sure that we're showing honor in our lives. Of course, it should be everywhere, right? But, we got to get the big rocks in first.
Right, we got to get the big rocks first.
Well, when I think of honor, as someone who loves history, I figured you would kind of love this. Just recently asked you, who do you think the best leader ever to live is, which is the fairest question ever, of course. I don't even remember who you said, but I altered that so that you would say Winston Churchill, of course, so I could use this illustration. Many people will kind of remember this or hear the story, but we all know that Winston Churchill served as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during World War II and was known for his indomitable spirit and his powerful speeches.
And his late rising.
That's fair. And, the cigars in the bathtub and all that stuff. That's the real, okay, that's the truth. That's what we remember. Well,
indomitable spirit.
If you have never watched The Crown, I'll be honest, this is where I learned about Clement Attlee. Isn't that funny? I skipped right over all the history books, and here's where I went. But Attlee was his political rival, who was the leader of the Labour Party, and ended up serving as the prime minister following Churchill. And as I learned from The Crown, implemented some very serious and significant social reforms. Why I want to bring them up is it was very interesting as two people who were very opposed of the other's viewpoints. Their relationship highlights how true honor transcends political rivalry. And reflects mutual respect. So in 1945, Churchill's wartime leadership, the Labour Party wins by a landslide victory in the general election, and Attlee becomes prime minister. Churchill afterwards famously remarks about Attlee, stating that he had a quote-unquote sense of duty. And after his election, he said, "We shall never be able to tell how much we owe to him," which is an unbelievable thing to be able to say that, especially after losing. Churchill's acknowledgement of Attlee's capabilities and character had a profound impact on the political climate of post-war Britain. And so his remarks and their relationship, despite disunity in some viewpoints.
Yeah, for sure. They disagreed.
Yep. That helped foster a sense of unity during some national rebuilding. It made all the difference. So what is honor? Well, to kind of look at that story, honor does at least a couple things. It builds relationships because we honor one another. Doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but it also encourages and it also unifies. And so I think it's important to think of this, that honor is not just a passive respect, but an active way that we reflect God's character and how we treat others. Remember, honor, before anyone decided to show another person honor, God calls us to do that. And so the concept of honor is more needed and more, I think, more misunderstood probably than ever. So here's a working definition of what honor is. Honor is showing respect and value to others based on their worth or position. So it's showing respect and value based on two things: on our worth and our position or our title. So we often kind of can cling to one or the other, where we honor the person who has that title, but we don't honor them for their worth at all, or we simply try to honor people for their worth, and we throw away title as if that's a bad thing. I think both are biblical, and both we need to be able to hold both. So honor means to recognize the inherent worth of someone and act accordingly with respect, value, and dignity. So it's not contingent on whether the person is deserving, but reflects the honor God has given us. You disagree, you can go to Romans 12, right? And that's where Paul starts writing about honor and honoring people who have been appointed in positions. And so in Romans 13, this idea is in verses 1 and 2, he says, everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. So then the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command. That's bold. And those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. So we show honor based on those two things for sure, and which I think covers everyone. But we see them outwork, like the outworking of them is a little bit different. So remember, number one is based on worth, which is a pretty light way to say the imago Dei that God has given us, the image of God within us. We don't need to go too far or too deep on that. We actually have done a podcast on it. You can scroll down and listen to that whole bit. But it's the reality that God has made every single person not just special, but in his image, which means that no matter how bad we've gotten, no matter how poor our decisions are, no matter how bad we think we are at things that our culture values, it doesn't matter, that God says that we all have an inherent value and an inherent worth. So that's an unbelievable thing. But also that we honor people of positions and titles as well. Like whether or not we like the current president or the next president or the leader of insert that country here or whatever it is, God has called us to honor a position, to honor a title, because those are worthwhile. And as we just read in Romans 13, God appoints them and puts them there. And so this isn't just a lackluster thing, it's a big thing.
Right. And so honor is more than, but different than obey.
Yeah.
Like they're different words because you don't always obey. Like you may, okay, like let's say in a workplace setting, you may end up quitting your job, i.e. you can't obey your boss anymore. You can't do the things she wants. So you quit your job. But you can still honor her.
Yeah.
By doing it honorably.
And
good. Maybe not ghosting her.
Yeah.
Just don't show up at work for 3 weeks in a row.
And so where do we get this kind of idea of honor? And I've already mentioned a couple, and also another great place is 1 Peter 2:17, where Peter writes, honor everyone. It's like, everyone? Well, certainly not them.
Wow.
Or he says, yeah, honor everyone. Love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. Like, which is wild because we need to remember the context of this situation. These are people being persecuted by whom? Like the emperor.
Peter's a book about suffering.
Yeah. And so part of me thinks when he writes that, like the original manuscript was probably like, he was like shaking, like, honor them. Are you sure? Like, okay. So,
well, and that's the worth and the position. Like if honor is when we respect and value others because of their worth and position, there it is in one verse. Honor everyone because everyone has worth, and then honor the emperor, AKA those with position.
Yeah.
That's good.
And we'll end up getting into a bit of the nuance, but like, the emperor is a great kind of diagnostic tool of what do we do when we are called to honor someone and yet we disagree with them? Because I'm guarantee you Peter didn't agree with all of the emperor's politics because it doesn't matter who it was. Let's just pick Nero. We'll go, almost worse to the worst here. But he was, burning Christians a lot.
Fiddler.
I've seen the have you seen like where they recreate the busts of them and it's like they look at them what they look like today and it's like, come on, no wonder God looked that way. Anyways, back on track.
Poor Nero.
Well, It's like, I'm sure he didn't agree with, burning Christians alive and, using them,
Peter, that is.
yeah, possibly using them to light his gardens, like throughout like these
So
terrible,
bad.
horrific
So bad.
things. Of course he didn't agree with that. Of course Peter didn't agree with that. But he still knows, and yet I'm still called to honor him.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievably difficult situation. So I think this starts off with, honor starts off with this incredible reality that honor actually doesn't start with you, it starts with God. So our reverence and worship for God must come first. So Exodus 20 verse 3 says, "You shall have no other gods before me." I mean, like there's so many examples of this. The 10 Commandments, just as I was reading, like I think most people probably know this. The 10 Commandments is broken into two groups, right? So God, towards God and towards others. So how to honor God and how to honor people. Like, so our relationship with God, have no other gods before me, have no idols, don't misuse the Lord's name, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Like those are the ways that we honor God.
Yeah.
But I love that in the 10 Commandments, like there's also this how to honor people, like at the forefront, the foundation of the people of God, like the law for how they're to govern themselves is how to honor God and how to honor one another. And so relationship with others, honor your mother and father, don't murder. That usually murder doesn't seem to go well with honor, right? Don't commit adultery, don't
Usually.
steal, don't give false testimony, don't covet. Like these are at the foundation of the people of God and how they are called to act with honor towards God and how they're called to act with honor towards the people around them.
That's good. That's good. So because we honor God, it leads us to treat people differently with respect and value because of their worth and or position. But we are all doing that under our desire to honor God, to respect God, to value God and his judgments and his ideas. So this is helpful. Like I'm actually thinking of honor in a Godward motion first.
Yeah.
Okay, so that keeps me going. All right.
Well, and then there's tons more stories, right? And all throughout the Bible. I mean, I think of, Daniel in the lion's den when Darius decrees to pray to no other God than him, right?
Right.
And so Daniel's like, why? And he's in that dilemma. How do I honor this guy who's called me not to honor the one true God? And so here Daniel stands up against it and and has to pay the cost, which is to be thrown in the lion's den. In the same kind of vein, the famous story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as they won't bow to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. Again, in the same situation. How do we honor the king, but at the forefront honor God, who we're called to honor first? And so they have to pay the cost as well as they're thrown into the fiery furnace. It's also true in the New Testament, the apostles in front of the Sanhedrin. As the Sanhedrin is screaming at them, like, just stop teaching about Jesus. And so I love what Peter and probably the rest of the disciples said. That no. We must obey God rather than men. Honor just starts with God.
And they left from that room rejoicing because they were counted worthy to suffer for the name. I love that.
It's incredible.
I love that verse.
And so there absolutely is a tension between, how we honor God and how we honor kind of through the world around us. But the foundation of it and the starting point is that honor starts from the Lord. But as I was saying, kind of there's a flow to honor, right?
Yeah. So this is good. This is helpful. I like this.
Like, so it starts from God and it, we honor God and then we have that honor flow out from God to others. So because we honor God, we are called to honor those he has created. Remember, that's the Imago Dei, that everyone deserves honor and also the titles as well. Honor flows into every relationship from family to leaders to strangers. Again, it's not just based on how well you know them. This is not sucking up because that person has that title.
Right.
Like, you're honoring the position, and that's a good thing. Like, because a lot of times we all like to jump to the person who has terrible, characteristics and has terrible character in general, but they have the title and like, I'm just called to honor. Like, sometimes we're called to honor the position, and that's okay. But a lot of times people who hold the position, like, they're worth, they earned that position, right?
Yeah.
And so they're worth honoring.
Yeah.
So how do we remember this? What does this look like?
Yeah. How do we flesh it out into our lives?
And so I'm trying to get better about giving people handles on things. And so I was really working hard, and I formed it into a pretty easy framework, I think, for us to look at this. That is called the Assure framework. Ooh. So if you want to be assured that you're showing honor, you can do these 6 things, right?
I like it.
So we'll go through them pretty quick. Yeah. 6 things. That's right.
Yep. I'm counting them up there.
So it's going to follow the acronym ASSURE, ASSURE. So the very first one is acknowledge the dignity of others. So remember, everyone is made in the image of God, Genesis 1:27. And therefore, across the board, whether you like them or hate them, whether they're against your positions on politics or whatever, or faith, or doesn't matter.
Or parents not letting your teenagers go out at night, the teenager can acknowledge the dignity of others.
Yeah. And therefore they deserve respect, and regardless of their status, beliefs, or actions. So what this means is that we're called to treat everyone with dignity. And this is where I need to remember it, because I think of it always in the big interactions, like when the cameras are on and it feels like the big meeting with the big title. It's like I can remember to show honor there, but this is acknowledge the dignity of others, like everywhere, even in the minor interactions.
Right.
So whether it's the person who's on the side of the road asking for, or like who yells at you asking for money. Like I just recently had this, and I was like, the last thing I want to do is show honor. But he still deserves it because he reflects the image of God, and he has the image of God in him. Whether it's the colleague who you disagree with, who just constantly seems to be backstabbing, that's right. Absolutely.
No, I'm not backstabbing.
You can't backstab down, can you? Or the political. Oh, well, yeah. I wouldn't know because we don't have that here. Think about how Jesus treated the Samaritan woman. Every reason in the world not to honor her. I mean, Jesus is Jesus. He's Jewish. She's a most likely poor Samaritan woman who's committed adultery, who's done some heinous things. But what does he do at the well? He shows her dignity despite how low her status is. I think this is going to be the shock, right? I think we just need to be like Jesus, right? And so we need to acknowledge other people's dignity. Whether we see it or not, we need to remember that person's made in the image of God, whether they have the title or not.
And even the person at the Food Lion parking lot who doesn't put their shopping cart away.
No. I refuse this.
That person also deserves dignity.
Well, this is for everyone else, not for me.
This was our conversation last week. Ben has a hard time with the parking lot
I show
filled with shopping carts.
It's true. Everybody has a place there. The Lord hasn't quite shown his light on.
Heart. Yeah. But I like it though. Acknowledge the dignity of the woman at the well, or the shopping carts in your parking spot.
Okay, so the first S, speak with respect.
Okay, acknowledge the dignity of others. Now, speak with respect. Okay.
Well, and everybody knows it's like,
that goes without saying.
Honestly. There's a difference between saying, like in your head going, that person has dignity, and then speaking to them as if they don't.
Right.
I'm guilty of this. Like I know that person has made in the image of God, and I need to show them honor, and might show them honor in my head, but outwardly, maybe it's peer pressure, and I don't want to because no one else is.
That's a good point.
Or I just really don't want to have to. And again, this is a little dramatic, but like bear that cross. Like,
right.
I'm just like, and so we need to speak with respect. So the next two for sure are active. So speak with respect. So what does it mean? Our words should reflect the values that we place on others. I mean, you can take a look at Ephesians 4:29. Paul kind of brings this idea out. But how speaking honorably doesn't mean that we avoid harsh truths. Like you can communicate hard things and difficult things and things that you know are going to hurt someone, and you can do it honorably. I bet we all have had an experience where someone has done that, and we've all had experiences where someone didn't. And so God calls us to be people who speak hard things honorably, but where we also communicate with kindness and respect. Again, that famous, speak to someone as you want to be spoken to, right?
Yeah, right.
So we need to engage in conversations without resorting to insult or mockery, and to lift them up.
And it's hard because we don't see the models of conversations without insult or mockery.
Yeah.
Because what gets on our screens or on TV is the explosion moments, the fireworks moment in any conversation. So you might have an hour-long interview, but what you get to watch is the 1 minute of fireworks.
It's absolutely true.
In public officials and stuff.
Well, and I think and again, I'm kind of targeting it just because we're in the political season, but that's so much. Let me walk you through. Yeah. Well, it's like the political sphere that we're in has almost convinced us that a new and better world can't be had through patient change, but through enough drama.
Yeah.
And I feel like we get that like with so many of their words. Like it's like it can't happen through patient affect with an A, but always through dramatic effect with an E. And so that gets messy because you start having to use words that are always pointed and they're always jagged. And they leave real wounds and real scars. And part of showing one another respect is using words that are precise, I think, and you're careful with when you know they will cause wounds, but it always has the heart to not leave a scar and leave a wound for a wound's sake, but to ultimately bring healing. And again, we all have an idea of what that looks like, I think. And so,
so acknowledge the dignity of others, speak with respect. What else?
And we need to serve.
Now, this is interesting. I did not expect this one in showing honor. Talk about this. This is good.
Well,
so the second S is serve.
Yeah, I think we always need to be people who are showing honor, not just inwardly, but outwardly. And part of doing things outwardly is not just saying things, but also acting on them. So honor is reflected, I think, in serving others, expecting nothing in return. That's a bit of Mark 10:45. And then I think service demonstrates that we value others as Christ did. Like Jesus didn't just tell people, like walk by them and said, hey, you're doing great. Like I honor you and I think you're you're doing awesome. And then just walk on and people are like, okay. No, but like he actually showed it. Like honor is to be shown. 1 Peter 2:12, conduct yourselves. That's action honorably among the Gentiles. Why? So that in a case where they speak against you as those who do what is evil, they will, by observing your good works, glorify God on the day of visitation. That's intense because the way that you act and the way that you act in a way that shows people honor oftentimes exemplifies Jesus long before you ever have a way to preach his name or to talk or to speak the gospel into a life. Like, I mean, everybody, it's like, we kind of get that idea. It's like people get that from the way that you act and even the way that you talk before they ever actually talk to you.
And to bring it closer to home, I think as we serve our wives or serve our spouses or serve our children or serve our parents, but I just know in my marriage, I know the things I'd rather do, which are helpful around the house and so of service. So I gravitate to those and I do those, but that's kind of helping out the family and serving, but it's also doing the things I want to do to accomplish things. But what if I thought through the things that would really lighten Susan's load or the things that she's frustrated at or something and say, let me step into those for you, like serve selflessly here. And in that way, honor her in a way that, I mean, I do the dishes most nights just because it's fine. It's not a big deal to me. Well, then that's not even honoring anymore, basically. Like, what if I did the hard thing that I don't like to do?
Yeah.
But that really I know good. She doesn't.
Yeah. One of the ways I often talk to students about this kind of stuff was like, service doesn't always mean going somewhere and building something or, putting like moving stuff, for a student ministry thing or whatever it is. Like you can serve at school. And again, like we don't ever want to be people who look like that. We say one thing and we act another way. Right. Yeah. And so it's like one of the most profound things that ways you could serve the people around you is when you see the people at the lunch tables who are sitting by themselves, like going to sit with them. And that's a huge step. You'll see students like, whoa. Yeah. But you will watch it make all the difference in the world. And it's like, why? Because if they're actually made in the image of God, they deserve community. They deserve relationships. They deserve that connection. And it's like, you could be the one who helps make that happen. That's huge.
And you're never diminished when you show honor.
Absolutely.
Like there's just something mystical in it. God always elevates you when you show honor.
And so what do we do with this? I think we need to seek opportunities to serve your community.
That's good.
The family, like you had mentioned, and even those you disagree with. Like if you want, and it's also a great way to, when you're like, I'm not there yet, that's a great way to start enacting it before you get there. Like if you want to help see, like help, like kind of where you can get to the point where you're like, I'm not ready to honor that person or I'm struggling with this. Like you start going to serve them. That is a great entry point.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be like you finally have made it and now you go. Like it's a great way to start it. All right. So that's good. A, S, and S. And let's quickly go to U. which is uphold reputations in their absence.
Uphold reputations in the person's absence. Okay.
We have probably all had a moment where someone was speaking badly of someone that we liked and we got offended or it bothered us. And we've also all had moments where somebody was speaking poorly of someone that we speak poorly of, and we probably did what? We joined them. I've totally not ever done this, Jason. So what does this mean? It means
this is all new to me, man. I've never heard of this.
Absolutely. Honor means defending someone's character, especially when they aren't present. Proverbs 16:28, this idea. And so I think this reflects this Christ-like love and integrity. And so what is this like? We talk about this a lot in student ministry. We don't always put in upholding reputation, and maybe I'll start doing that. But one of the ways that we just kind of action this is to avoid gossip. Because if you make gossip, like if you say, okay, gossip is bad and I don't want to do that, there's a couple key phrases that you can always, I mean, one of the big ones is, have you heard about? I mean, did you see what happened? Like, those are great entry points into saying some really hard things. You know, I actually love, he'd probably hate that I mentioned his name here, but Kent has been such a help for me on this. Like, he really has. Because we'll have from time to time people who come to Grace and they've left another church somewhere.
Right.
And it's like, hey, I thought you went to insert this church there. It's like, yeah. And then, well, pastor, insert name here, or, you know, those people over there. And they'll start going down a path that starts to diminish, or, I mean, there just isn't kind. And I love what Kent, and he's really taught me this. He's like, he'll kind of say this like, oh, you're from insert that church here. We've got a lot of friends over there. And it almost like cuts them short of being able to start attacking all the people. Yeah. He says, or I've heard him say, oh, you know, insert that pastor's name. Like, man, we really respect what he does over there. And I love that he's just a guy that, you know, he will uphold other people's reputations. And I've learned so much from that. It's like, good. And when you do that, when you uphold someone's honor, I think you close the door for them to attack that person, because they're like, oh, well, now it's personal. Now it's not like, now we're not just addressing some guy. I'm now talking about your friend, and you'll watch people be like, and I think you can actually help people in that way. Cause I don't think anyone really wants to be a gossip.
I think that's right. And we just slide into it. Like we just slide into the mud kind of thing. And when someone shows us where the path is, it's a little easier to get on it.
Yeah. And maybe you get to be the person who, so often I think when we do gossip and we do say really harmful or hurtful things about people, a lot of times it's just our perspective because we got wounded. And so you get to help almost enlighten them and lead them to some of the really good things about that person.
And you don't have to say you weren't wounded.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, people, if they're hurting, but at the same time, we're not throwing all God's work in another church under the bus because you're coming here wounded.
Yeah.
Same with, I'm not going to throw that whole person under the bus because I'm hearing my friend gossip about them.
Yeah.
Or I'm sharing a prayer request with you.
Yeah.
See, I don't gossip. I just share prayer requests.
That's how it usually goes, right?
That is true. It's terrible.
Let's pray for. Have you heard about? Okay, so that's ASSU, and then so now we're down to R. The last two R, respectfully submit to authority. And so let's put in quotations or parentheses when appropriate, right? So what does this mean? Scripture calls us to submit to governing authorities. We talked about that earlier, Romans 13. But also to hold on to our integrity before God. Again, all those stories of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and on. And so Daniel, we honor authority by respecting their position, even if we disagree. So kind of what does that look like?
Yeah.
I mean, again, you brought this up. It doesn't always mean submission. It doesn't just mean when a leader says something, it doesn't just go, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, all the time. Like, you don't have to always do it. Obedience is not the same thing as honor, right? You can disagree and do something different and still show honor.
Yeah. And we have the perfect example of that in civil disobedience in the civil rights movement. They submitted without obeying.
Yeah.
They showed honor while revealing the depth of dishonor in the system.
Yeah.
And I think, why, to me, that is the biggest gift that God has given to the American culture in the last 50 years. is that gift of civil disobedience, how to pique the conscience while not breaking down.
Yeah.
I mean, I think more recently we've seen protests that have been like, let's burn everything to the ground, which is not helpful.
Yeah.
But how do we say, this is wrong, we need to stop it in a way that respects and honors? And I think it's exactly what you're saying here. Respectfully submit to authority. I would say, even when you have to disobey authority, you still submit to it, as Martin Luther King ended up in jail.
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly right. Yeah. And yeah, just as all those biblical examples, right? They
ended up in the lion's den, in the fiery furnace. Yep. They left.
That's really good. And so that's ASSUR. And then the last one is E, which is engage in prayer for others. I'll be honest, this one has just been a personal one and has been really helpful for me as someone who doesn't always want to opt for honor, specifically for people who I disagree with or who have hurt me or don't put their shopping carts back, and I think are the only people not made in the image of God, which is not true. That and I said this earlier about a different one. One of the greatest ways I think to become what we're trying to get to is to enact it before you're even there. Like that's part of the gospel. We're following Jesus, becoming like him long before we are like him, because the process really gets us to the destination. Like we all get that. And so I think one of the greatest things about prayer is really more about God forming you through your prayer than it is about you getting things that you want or getting things accomplished. So what does engage in prayer for others mean? It means prayer is one of the most powerful ways that we can honor others, especially I think our leaders. So 1 Timothy 2:1-2 talks about this. And so one of the ways I think this is really helpful is like, I can tend to, when I think of prayer, recently we just had a praying for the election, and it's like, is that really going to help? Is that really going to matter? Oh, yes, because it's going to do at least two things. One, it's going to make a difference to that candidate through the election, through these things, all of those things. It literally will make a difference. And then two, it's going to for sure make a difference in you. I don't know. My judgment seems to just sometimes, a good amount of times, lighten when I'm praying. It's there, the things I say in my head about someone, those I'm just not always willing to say before the Lord. And it's so helpful because then I feel that conviction. So I think we need to pray for wisdom and guidance for our leaders.
Yeah.
So church leaders, political leaders, school leaders, leaders of our family. It doesn't matter who, but leaders, but also our coworker, our work leaders, and also our family members. So when we are frustrated with the leaders at our job, the leaders in our home, our leaders of our country, I think we need to pause and offer a prayer for their wisdom and heart instead of venting frustrations. This is only really directed at me. I mean, I'm sure some of us can glean from this, but this one's really for me. I just always this has been one of the most game-changing things for me, because I want to, I love to vent when I get really frustrated. And part of that is almost forcing the room to feel like me. It's getting away with the opposite of all these things and just calling it venting. I'm not really saying it about that person. I'm just saying it out loud. That's not true. I'm saying it out loud about that person. You know what I'm saying? And so this has been so helpful. And I even said this, a year or two ago in our marriages, that we need to say it to him, God, before we say it to them, our spouse. And this has been such a game changer in my marriage. It's been a game changer, in the ways, my boss frustrates me from time to time.
It's crazy to think.
I know. And on. And so,
but that you can vent to God
for sure
is what's so gentle about him.
Yep.
We don't have to varnish and polish our prayers. We can just pour out our hearts. And in that pouring out, as you just said, we can expend ourselves in our venting or whatever. And then over time, he nourishes us and changes us and brings something honorable out of that.
So Jason, let's talk really, that's a sure.
Okay, so acknowledge dignity. Am I getting this right? So assure, acknowledge the dignity of others, speak with respect, serve selflessly, uphold the reputation of others in their absence, respectfully submit to authority, and engage in prayer for others. when I'm doing those things, I am showing honor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very helpful. Very, very like it's 6 things, and but it's right there. It's the package deal.
Yeah, maybe, and it's like, well, I don't have any of them. So maybe start with 1 or 2, but I'd be willing to bet all of us we're pretty good at a good amount of those.
We're doing some of them. I like it. Well, what if we tried to just flesh it out in a couple of key relationships? What does showing honor look like inside the home and maybe inside the workplace?
So, the Lord calls us to honor, again, wherever we are. Yeah, a couple of those key places, I think, is with our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Ephesians 6, 1-3. So kind of honoring parents by respecting their guidance and caring for them as they age. Like I have to talk to students a little bit differently than what I'm figuring out now. It's like, because they're looking up towards their parents, I'm kind of looking, laterally. Like,
laterally.
As I've become like friends with my dad, but it's also as he ages, like that, we have to figure that out. I mean, and I don't know yet. So,
and I walked that, with the degenerative disease that for my mom, I mean, then she really becomes like a child.
Yeah.
And is in the care of her kids.
One of the ways that I've kind of applied this is really trying to always listen with patience, because my dad doesn't quite always understand the exact way that my family is going to do family, and that's a little bit different, and we always figure that out. Or he'll have opinions, and I'm like, well, that might work, or oh wait, I really need to hear that. Listen with patience, and then also showing appreciation for their sacrifices. So, in the 3 years that I've been a parent, it's funny, and I'm not even like ankle deep probably into them yet, but it's like so much of parenting is defined by the sacrifices, right? And so I remember a story, like when I was going through college. My dad ended up getting, like, he's a school teacher for so much of his life, like 44 years, I think, or something. And he got a summer job to help pay for my college. I mean, he was running a bread route, like from a friend who, get up at 4 or 3 a.m. in the morning to stock a truck with bread and then drive to different stores all over the Nashville area, dropping off bread so that he could make sure that I could go to school. I had a place to live, like money for a place to live, and that I wouldn't have any debt. I'm going to be honest with you, that story marks me as a man, because that's what my dad was willing to do for me. And it doesn't matter, like, that's who he is, and that's how he sees me. And for the rest of my life, I hope like I don't ever lose that. It's like, he will never be less than that guy. And so whatever it takes to take care, whatever it takes to show him honor and to love him through, like, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So we need to show our parents honor. I think one of the hardest ways is when you're doing that up, and you're as a
teenager.
Kid, and you're trying to figure out what that looks like, as you have opinions and you and you're not always sure why they're doing that.
Well, I would say in our experience with our teenage boys when they were teenagers is I was slower to show them honor. I was more of the parents have lived more of life, and we see more of the road ahead, and you guys have a smaller experience, so you all should listen to us all the time. And Susan, having worked with college students, and she said, honey, let's listen to their opinions on things that aren't white or black, and let's try to see where we can hear them out. And that showing of them honor really grew their showing of us honor.
Wow.
And so that little simple, like, listening ears go both ways. So while, yes, I mean, parents, we do want our children to honor us, because we want to do what we can to be honorable so that they can honor us. Because if they don't understand how to deal with authority, they're never going to get ahead in the world. They're never going to be able to relate to the Lord and then relate to the world. But if we don't ever show them honor, how will they know what it looks like to show honor? That when they feel it, it makes a difference.
Amen. So God calls us to honor our parents.
How about our spouses? What does that look like?
That's a good question. When I think of that, as I was preparing, I'll jump to 1 Peter 3:7. I mean, kind of on this idea of honor your spouse by showing mutual respect, love, and understanding. There's a line that I picked up from a pastor a long time ago that, marriage is a submission competition. And that's always just, ever since I heard that, it's really marked me. Because again, as a competitive person, like I always have this tension of like, well, it's all or nothing. I either win or I completely lose so that they can win. And it's like, what I love about submission competition is you have to do it together, and it's a race to the back of the line. Let me serve you.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'll serve you. And it's like, no.
Yep.
And then sometimes you just go, okay, you can start. Like, cool. And this has just been really helpful. So what are some ways to do this? Like, I think we always need to try to make sure that we're speaking well of our spouse in public. So
I think you need to say that again.
We need to always speak well of our spouses in public. So let me give 2 very quick stories. Really? Ready? This was actually one of the very first critiques that I ever remember you giving me. I used to, yeah. So this is really funny. Well, no, I'm not above this.
It's not in
this
the notes.
Podcast. Yeah. Well, I want everyone to hear this. My first year here, again, Janessa and I had a year of marriage or so under our belt. So again, extremely new. Moved here, and that first year that we were here, going into our second year of marriage, I'm a very like sarcastic but joking person, and I actually always mean it out of love.
Yep.
And so she gets that, and that doesn't mean there wasn't wounds. That's not what I'm not trying to say. But like we had she felt fine about that from what I could tell. We'll get her on next time, and she can answer. She'll give her a rebuttal. But the way that other people were hearing it is very different than the way that she was understanding it.
Or that you were meaning
or the way that I was meaning it. And so, believe it or not, everybody, Jason actually came to me and was like, hey, by the way, I know that you don't mean this, but this is how I've heard you talk about Janessa. And I just want you to know that. And that was, and of course that hurt because you're like, well, I don't mean that of her. And this is what I mean. And it's like, but that's exactly right. Now, let's jump to this past week. I'm meeting with someone who doesn't actually know the Lord, and we start having a conversation. This is a parent of a kid in our student ministry. And for the first 15 minutes, we're talking about marriage, our wives, being married to them, the miraculous nature of childbirth and them having children, and me just going, man, I love my wife so much, and she is awesome, and she does so many things. And it was just like I wasn't, and it wasn't fake at all. Like I was just being open and honest. And I watched, I didn't think about it, but this person ended up who didn't really know me was been like, yeah, I mean, just the way that you talk about your wife, I respect you, and I'm fine with this thing that we were meeting about. And I thought, I'm like, that's right. And that mattered to him, and it matters to us. And it's like, we should always be people, because 1, we don't know who's listening. And 2, God just calls us to it. We should always speak well of our spouses in public. Yeah. And that doesn't mean lying.
No.
Everybody has faults.
Yeah. But you don't have to air them all the time. And I think we have all gravitated. We all know those couples where you can tell that they value and love each other. They have a great friendship and a deep relationship. And it's not the couples that are always taking every chance they can to give a shot.
Yeah.
That's just so tiring. And that's not what you were doing back then. I'm not,
yeah.
But I'm just saying, we've all, the old ball and chain, there's no room for that. I mean, it's just not.
Yeah.
Okay. So parents, spouses, I mean, this is good. This is just super practical. Let's get into some harder ones. How about politicians? Should we go right there yet?
I mean, why not? Well, it's and this seems like it would be really touchy, but the Bible just talks about it more often, or so often actually.
Yeah, and we already have talked about it a little bit.
And so, I think we need to honor them as politicians through respect and prayer, regardless of personal political preferences. I think we always look. And this is me too. We need to avoid slanderous social media posts about leaders. And it's like, well, I don't do that.
You mean writing them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or sharing them.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we always need to fact check what we share as well. That goes for, especially, and we'll probably do a podcast eventually on this, but all the AI generated ones too, where it's it almost overly honors somebody, where it's well, they weren't even there. Yeah. They didn't even do that. But also the ones that completely slander the person, all of that. And be able to engage with policies constructively and be open and honest with them and real about it. So here's the one that personally I think is hard is when we have, let's go just because we're in a presidential election, like a lot of people have the candidate that they want to win. That's great. That's fine. Like that's a good
Mine's
thing.
not running.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm voting for Jesus. I'll write him in. I think where it gets wrong, like we get into problematic territory, is when we start being overt about like, that's not my president. It's like,
Right.
I'm against them. Like mine.
Mhm.
And it's like, and yet somehow we also, I get that we don't like the person that maybe got voted in or they got elected, but yet God is sovereign. And part of his sovereignty is he elects officials.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, through
Yep.
a public election, here in the US, but yet he's the one who appoints them. And so part of that, again, that flow of honor, it starts with God and it goes out from us, right? And that means like, even when it's the person that we don't like, we show them honor. I love this quick story, and then we'll move on to another one. Abraham Lincoln, I thought, did this really well. During his presidency, Lincoln showed honor to a lot of his political rivals by not burning them at the stake, not having them beheaded, but by including them in his cabinet. That was famously known as the team of rivals.
Yeah. Doris Kearns Goodwin book.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I just think that's helpful. And I'm not saying we need to go find everybody and put them all on our teams
But there's an example there.
Yeah.
There's an example there. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Because, I don't know. Anyway, showing honor to politicians in the silly season, which I jokingly call it that. And I'm sorry if I'm offending people because, the fact is we are not in North Korea or Iran. We do get to have a say in the outcome, but it is still the silly season to show honor. I remember being in a local church here. They would do a Thursday. It was an African-American church predominantly, and the pastor was African-American leadership, and we love them. And it was 2014-15, and I'd go over there Thursday for noontime service. I loved it. And I went a fair amount, like at least once a month, sometimes more. And a big picture of Barack and Michelle Obama in the lobby. And I loved it because, he was the president, and it's kind of fun to be able to celebrate with the community. And so then I went again in about February of 2017, after the 2016 election, after the inauguration. And this pastor would always pray for the president and his wife, for the Obamas in the prayer. And so then I went in February 2017, and do you know what he was praying for? President Trump and his wife, as the Lord calls us to pray for our leaders. And I thought, I bet you there are many churches filled with folks on the right who wouldn't have prayed for Obama during those years.
Yeah.
And that just was really honorable to me.
Yeah. It's really good.
Anyway, we could probably, let's do one last one of these, since we're already talking about politicians and folks we disagree with. How about difficult people or so-called enemies? Because we all go through times where people hurt us, and it may be, or they do us dirty. They just do us wrong. Yeah. And how, like, I know I'm supposed to show them honor. You don't have to convince me of that now. What do I do?
Yeah. So I think we're called to honor even those, just as you were saying, who mistreat them by doing a couple of things, by praying for them. And I actually think many people can roll their eyes at this, but also by not retaliating.
No, that is the biggest thing.
Like, well, it sounds passive, but one of the most active things and the most honoring, and I think mature things, is having something done to you and choosing to bear the cost of it and not to retaliate. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, I think a retaliation is you've taken the cost and now you're going to give it back, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this can sound extreme, but Jesus was the one who bore the sin of weight and death, and he didn't retaliate. Like, he took it. And I think that's an incredible model. Like, I think of one of my favorite stories of, the great missionary, more or less, Corrie ten Boom, right? Mm-hmm. There was a Dutch watchmaker who, along with her family, helped many Jews escape the Nazis during World War II. And after being imprisoned in a concentration camp for her actions, she survived later. And here was the wild thing. She didn't retaliate. She forgave her captors. And again, that can be a far off story. And we're probably not going to be thrown into concentration camps, where we're taken advantage of by Nazis and, be the lowest of low, but we will be mistreated at work.
Mm-hmm.
Happens to me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding. We will be mistreated out in the public. Somebody named Ben might berate you for not putting your shopping cart back. At different times, people will take advantage of you. You won't get your way. You will be hurt. You will have to bear the cost. And the ability to pray for them, despite what they've done to you, and then not to retaliate. I can think of very few things that are greater markers of what honor is and what maturity looks like than that.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly what Jesus did, who prayed for the people who forgive them, Lord, for they don't know what they do, and did not retaliate, and took it as he could have called legions of angels down.
Mm-hmm.
Why? For the joy that was set before him.
Yeah.
I mean, so how do you do that? Like, I do think a part of it is for the joy that's set before you, which is actually not the salvation of everyone, but of who the Lord is, and that God is inviting us to be more like him. Like, I think that's an incredible joy that he has set before every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that ability. And part of that, as we action that and we operationalize that, is showing honor.
Mm-hmm.
Because he first showed us honor when we didn't deserve it. And to show those who have hurt us is the biggest way I think that we can show honor to those who have hurt us and we feel like don't deserve it, but they do.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're, as we talked about earlier, they're made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sinners.
True.
And the grace, they might only see grace through us when we don't retaliate.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. Now, Ben, there's a little bit of problem with showing honor. Some people, like we've just been talking about, our enemies,
Yeah.
who do us wrong, do us dirty, they don't deserve it. So what do we do in those cases?
Yeah.
Or what if someone's corrupt and, has forfeited?
Yeah.
Can you forfeit the call to show honor? I don't know. I'm just thinking this through right now.
Yeah. So I might need help with that, because I think that's so much of the rub, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are dishonorable people and corrupt people who have titles that they may no longer deserve. But I mean, again, I think the foundational idea is everyone is deserving of honor because they're made in the image of God, at least. So it's like you at least have to show it in that regard. Like,
yeah.
I think we can all have issues with someone with a title who is not living up to that title. But there's always the baseline net that needs to catch us, that we can't fall below, of how we show honor, because they matter. They really do.
Mm-hmm. And because we don't know the timeline God is working in their lives on, our honor shown to even those who are corrupt or dishonorable or seem to have forfeited, quote unquote, our showing them honor may be the final step in the timeline, or may be the necessary over the hump step in their timeline of grace that God uses in some way, either today or as a ticking time bomb, quote unquote, down the road.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we have time for this whole story, but that is so much of my story. Like I'll never forget, like one of my first entry points into the church was I got hired to be a part of a children's summer camp at a really big church. And then I got hired, and then I got let go because there wasn't enough kids. So they had to let go of some staff. And I wrote this letter that was honoring. And they actually reached out when somebody got hurt, and they were like, we were so marked by that. And like, they honored me. And I was like, wow, because my letter was a little bit sarcastic, actually. And they were honoring me, and I was seeing it. It gave me this pretty incredible picture of what the church is and who it is and like what that looks like. And I remember being I'm like, okay. And I ended up stepping into a bit of what they thought I really was.
Right.
And that was a pretty incredible thing.
Yeah. Now, showing honor as a little guardrail here does not mean being a doormat.
Yeah.
So the abused spouse or the abused family does not need to try to show honor by not acting. I mean, God does not want injustice and violence and so on and so forth. And if that's you or a friend of yours, I mean, the community at Grace is here to help. We do not need anyone thinking God wants them to stay in an abusive or destructive friendship, spousal relationship, home life relationship, or workplace setting.
Yeah.
So showing honor does not also mean don't ever speak up for what is wrong or unjust. No, God wants us to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. And that's it. But I mean, I think this is very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, God, the God, just as you were saying, the God who calls us to honor is also the God who holds truth and justice extremely important.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of who in your life needs to experience honor from you this week? I mean, that's a great question here. Who is it that I need to change how I deal with to show them more honor? Or who in my head needs to receive more honor from me? Who is it that I'm thinking about dishonorably, even if they would never know it? You know, whether it's in the public sphere or whether it's in the social sphere and I just don't say anything.
Yeah.
That matters.
It does. And the answer to that question, like this might get a little sticky really fast, but it also could be you. Like there are some times in our heads where we are ultimately very dishonoring of ourselves. And sometimes we just need that reminder. Like, I mean, I just heard a sermon this past Sunday. Wonder who spoke that one. It starts about reminding ourselves about what God has ultimately said about us. Like we need that because so much of, I mean, like the Christian faith is very much an identity faith, right? And it's God defining you and redefining you, telling you what you actually are. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that means sinful and broken. And then redefining you as what he's made you to be, holy and blameless and whole. And living into those things because he's paid for them already. And so some of us, we need to, yes, show honor outwardly, but we also need to go, no, this is who I am because this is who God has made me, and honor that as well. The only reason I say that is because from time to time that's true for me. I'm like, oh, I need to remind myself of that. Like by the grace of God, I'm not just what I was.
Right.
But through his power, I've made a couple steps.
And thinking more clearly of ourselves also honors God, who has done the work in us and is completing it. Well, Ben, this is good stuff. Thank you for doing the spade work to think about what honor is and living honorably and treating others with honor, and including at the end here, just a little treating ourselves with more honor. I think a lot of people do wrestle with that, with just self-talk that's bad.
Yeah.
You know, use the scripture to speak to yourself who you are. That's very good. And then the fun ASSURE to help us lean into several areas that will just let us be more honorable in our lives. Ben, I really appreciate it.
Good. Yeah, absolutely.
It's helped me. I know it's helped you as you dealt with me. No, but I hope everyone else, you enjoy it. Send it to a friend if it would be helpful for them. And maybe we could all honor Ben this week by bringing him our shopping carts and Food Lion. So take care, and we'll see you next time.